talking about issues that are at the interface between the animal world and humans. And it involves infectious diseases that come from animals and can be transmitted from animals into the human population, and sometimes from humans into animals. So we need to be bridging the divide between the world of the animal health and humans and human health.
I think it's very timely. The committee looked at the impact of emerging diseases and zoonotic diseases over the past decade or so and found a very significant impact not only on human health but on human well-being as tied to economics of losses associated with zoonotic diseases. And of course we see the emergence of another zoonotic disease, the novel H1N1 influenza that has become pandemic in a very short period of time, and it just emphasizes that I think the work of the committee has been very important in this area. All predictions that the committee is aware of would suggest that they're just going to increase in the future.
Yeah, if you analyse emerging diseases, the causes of the majority, almost all of them, are things that we do to the environment, land use change, changes in agriculture, or changes in our own population, travel and trade and demographic changes. So to really deal with emerging disease in the long term, we need to start to address some of those, what we call drivers of emergence.
Surveillance is that function that allows us to keep the finger on the pulse of what's happening in disease in different populations. And so surveillance involves having a systematic collection of data that's routine, that we can follow what happens on a regular basis, but also allows us to detect unusual disease events. By the time it's recognized in people, it's been circulating for some period of time, which leads to a huge need for response. If we could detect these diseases earlier, then we could mount a response and limit the spread of the disease. It would save human lives, it would lead to improved human health, and it would save huge economic consequences on trade and movement of animals and animal health as well.
The total cost of economic damage associated with disease outbreaks over the last decade has been estimated to be about $200 billion. So it's quite significant. If there's information about disease outbreaks that's available to everyone benefits. The question is who pays. But there's a strong role for the United States to unilaterally engage on promoting reporting, because the benefits to the US alone are significant enough that it's worth the cost to the US to engage in such a system. A previous example is of the US unilaterally paying for smallpox eradication. The money that was spent by the US on smallpox eradication throughout the world is recouped every 28 days in this country by not having to vaccinate people against smallpox.
If the majority of the laboratory effort to stop them is here in the States and Europe, and there's very little in developing countries, which is what the committee found, we seriously need to address that. We need to work with USAID and other partner organisations, World Health, OIE, FAO, to build laboratory capacity in developing countries where diseases first emerge. The committee looked at the origins of diseases that come from wildlife, and what we find is that things like trade in wildlife in a lot of parts of developing countries in the world is a high risk for pathogens to spill over into people. We now need to analyse the health threats of the wildlife trade and bring to bear some sort of legislation that the agencies can use to block a trade if it's very highly risk, or regulate a trade where there's a known zoonotic disease risk.
An important point that the report makes is that it is not just enough to write good regulations that require countries or local authorities to report disease outbreaks. We also have to be mindful and cognizant of the incentives that they face. Disease outbreaks are not reported if there is a threat of sanctions that would follow a disease outbreak. If countries perceive that they have some benefit to reporting an outbreak in the form of being able to contain that outbreak themselves, they are much likely to talk to other people about it.
I think it's essential that there be public-private partnerships established. Private sector is very deeply involved in food production, and they have learned a lot. They collect a lot of information. It's in their interest to keep their animals healthy.
Non-governmental organisations in the US and globally could play a critical role in getting the message out there that there are health issues associated with these trades and industries, but also in actually going out and collecting samples and looking for the next emerging pathogens.
There's a whole set of issues around trade in animals and animal products, which are part of the way that these diseases are moving around the globe. And so the World Trade Organization really needs to be engaged and involved. And at the same time, we're thinking about how do we finance the costs of this sustainable system for tracking, surveillance, and developing responses. And then the World Bank and the development banks around the world become important. This whole group have to come into the same sandbox and figure out how to play well together. Otherwise, we're not going to achieve what is really necessary to protect human health, animal health, food supply, and the economic costs of diseases in animals.